Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to Apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. We have Kurt Nelson on the line. Happy to announce that Kurt will be participating in our next volume of our best-selling business leaders book series. So Kurt, first I just want to say congratulations, and it's really an honor to work with you on the upcoming book.
Thank you. It's been fun and very insightful. So love all of it.
All right, Kurt. So we got a lot to cover today, and I love having a fellow podcaster on the line. So of course we're going to be talking about behavioral grooves. We will be talking about a lantern group, of course, and then of course we're also going to get into the overall topic, which is how behavior impacts employee performance. Before we start that, we'll
Getting into business, this class and consumer behavior really got me really interested in
yeah.
this, trying to understand why changing a product from $3 down to $2.99 increases the amount that you sell on that. But if you had, a product that was priced at $3.01 and you reduced it to $3, it makes absolutely no difference in sales. And
Mm,
so it's still, you're saving a penny. So it really is, from an economic perspective, the same thing. So obviously there's something psychological going on there. And so
mm,
that really kind of caught my interest. And I went and I left and went to work for a company full time. But then as I started to get into all of that a little bit more, really just started saying, hey, this is something that really intrigues me. And I want to explore, what is the motivational factor for employees? How do we get people excited about the jobs that they're doing? To start the Lantern Group to really make that happen.
yeah. And between having an interest in something and then pursuing it as a career, like, have you always had that entrepreneurial bent, or was this kind of like that thing that just prodded you over, let's just say, I don't know, the entrepreneurial journey edge, we'll say?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because if you would have asked me probably as a youngster if I have
Yeah.
an entrepreneurial component, I would have said no. I mean, I look back at my entire family, and everybody worked for somebody else, right?
Mm,
So I didn't have any mentors that were out there kind of doing their own thing. The only one that I had was my brother-in-law, who actually went bankrupt. So the
mm,
the the ideal of going out there and kind of doing something on your own was foreign, was a little
mm,
bit scary, was all of these factors that come in
mm,
when you think about that. And so, really, what kind of jump started it, I think was a couple different things. Is one of the guys that I worked with, we talked about he had the entrepreneurial bug and he wanted
Mm,
something and do different things, and he was trying to bring me in, and that never worked out. But all of a sudden, as I started talking with him, it kind of got infectious. And so all of a sudden, this guy whose father, grandfather, older siblings all worked for somebody else said,
mm,
what? I can go off and maybe do something on my own. And there's a lot of unlimited potential with that. And so
yeah.
that was really kind of I think for me, the impetus, that thing that pushed me over the edge. And then ended up, getting married and falling in love with a great woman whose family was all entrepreneurial. That was it. And so kind of that was the final push over that edge, as you like to say. So
Now, I want to stick on those early days just a little longer, because considering your background, it's just a guess. But when you said, I'm going to start a business, I'm being an entrepreneur, that's going to be pretty foreign, maybe for your community and support system. Like most of the time, people, I'll tell you from my experience, I'm picking myself for a moment. Like when I said I'm going to go for being a financial advisor, somebody that's always been a, pretty straight laced corporate America guy and start a business, let alone a media company, my network, my friends, everybody said I was crazy. And I mean that they just wanted the best for me, right? Like when I
yeah.
say they said that, like they don't mean any harm, but they're like, what are you talking about? Like, go do what? Like, how was that shift for you?
That's a really good question. I think the piece for me
Mm,
is that, again, as I mentioned, my wife's family
mm,
they were a family of entrepreneurs. Her father
yeah,
was an architect, had his own architectural firm. Her mother was a potter, had a potting business,
yeah,
all sorts of different pieces around that. So I think from that perspective, I had the support of her as well as that family network.
yeah,
I think my family just didn't understand, and
mm,
they were like, "All right, do whatever you want to do," and weren't there necessarily to help, but they were also
yeah,
supportive because they
of
were
course.
very cool, run and do that.
Yeah,
And I think from my friends' perspective, again, most of my friends worked for somebody else,
mm,
but they were looking out, like you said, they were looking out for my best interest.
mhm,
And I don't think any of them, I did it young enough that
yeah,
if I failed, I always said this, I had the rent that I paid on my apartment at that time, I could work at McDonald's and cover the rent and pay for food. So if I had to, I could
yeah,
go back and just, make sure that I survive. So
mm,
that was good. And I had the ability to be able to make that happen. But yeah,
yeah,
I didn't have the mentors. That was one of the things that as I look back, any kind of suggestion I give for young
mhm,
entrepreneurs is to really say, find those people who can help navigate the way for you, that can help not just from a cheerleading perspective, but from a way of saying, think about this. What are the
mhm,
roadblocks that you could potentially run into? What are the things that you need to be thinking about now
yeah.
that in 2 years, maybe not make a difference now, but in 2 years are going to be really important for you?
Yeah, I agree with that. And the reason why I wanted that story from you to see how your experience was is because I know some people will watch this that are at different phases of their entrepreneurial journeys, and whether they're being, really supported, or whether maybe nobody around you understands what you're talking about, it's
Yeah.
okay. You're in good company. There's a lot of other people out there like you. So I always make sure I get that story out, Kurt.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
So let's go a little bit further into today's topic. So how behavior impacts employee performance. So as you were going on this journey, going from when you started the business to now, like a lot of different things have taken place. Is there anything that, as you're building this business, like you're going further in your practice, like what kind of surprised you along the way?
I think what surprised me is the lack of knowledge that many
Mm,
leaders inside of larger organizations, those are typically what we
yeah.
work with Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, but their lack of understanding of some of
Mm,
the behavioral science, the psychology of human and employee behavior, and the kind of we're all stuck in our own heads. We're all stuck
mm,
with the history, the education, the experiences that we've had,
Mhm.
which is fantastic. But oftentimes, what we see leaders doing within organizations is saying, well, this is how I did it. This is what motivated me. This is what got me to this point, and that
Mhm.
should work for everybody else. And when
Yeah.
you look at the research and when you look at, building out programs or kind of building in initiatives in order to make those things happen,
Mhm.
that N of one isn't necessarily the best kind of path forward for the organization as a whole. And
Yeah.
people need to understand that our behaviors are driven by a number of different factors.
Mhm.
And it's not always just about the willpower and pay me more and do different pieces that are going to motivate people to do those things that you need them to do. That
Mm.
there are all these other factors that weigh in, and those can be, if not more important, at least as important, as you're
Yeah.
driving that business forward. And so the lack of understanding of some of those pieces from the leadership within organizations, and
Mhm.
kind of that, everything is surrounded by what I did and how I did it, was really kind of surprising for me.
Yeah. And so speaking of lack of understanding, I don't want to assume that our audience or anybody for that matter really understands behavioral science or like the context. So maybe we take a step back for a moment and tell us a little bit more about and help us define, what behavioral science is.
Yeah, so behavioral science has a technical kind of definition, but the way that I like to talk about it is really, it's any of the sciences that are out there: psychology, social psychology, sociology, economics, neuroscience, that deal with understanding why we think the way we think or why we behave the way we do. And what I love about behavioral science is it brings this cross pollination from a number of different kind of areas of research and tries to bring those together to say, all right, so if you do X and that drives Y behavior, let's
Mhm.
understand what it was about X that drove Y behavior, and really peeling back all of those onion layers that we have as humans, and trying to figure out what are those aspects that we can control, what are the aspects that are out of our control. And it
Mhm.
gets into a lot of the components around our innate biases. And that bias is not necessarily in I'm biased against a certain race or religion or
Mhm.
different pieces like that, but the biases that our mind plays on us in, we have a status quo bias that we
Mhm.
like things to stay the same as opposed to change. We're more likely to stick with something even if we think that, that future could be better with this. That's the loss aversion, this idea that
Mhm.
that a loss weighs a lot more on our mind than an equivalent gain. So if I lose $100, that's twice as
Mhm.
painful for me compared to the gain or the pleasure that I get from finding $100. And
Mhm.
there's a number of those. There's hundreds actually of them that the researchers have identified and found. And so really it's taking those insights into why we do what we do or why we think the way we do, and then
Mhm.
applying those, at least the way that I work is applying those into organizations and into how we think and act. So
Yeah. Can you give us maybe an example on how this affects us in our everyday business life? I know you gave one that was from a classic example, right? Pricing 299 to 301 or how it can affect sales, but how does our like day-to-day behavior, I should say one of the early examples that you gave, how does this affect us like in our day-to-day business lives?
yeah, it implies a number of different factors as we think
Mhm.
about this. So, if we think about this, and a lot of the work that we do is around employee motivation, employee engagement. And so, as I
Mhm.
mentioned before, oftentimes what we see is that leaders are going, well, when I was in the field, when I was a sales rep, or when I was an employee, this is what motivated me.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is we can show pretty emphatically that there are lots of factors that come into play. And so one of those
Mhm.
is oftentimes we say, well, employees, if you ask them, all they want is more money. And
Right.
economically speaking, that would be the right answer. If I'm a
Mhm.
classical economist, what I'm saying is, all right, pay me an extra, bonus of $10,000, and I can take that $10,000 and apply it to
Mhm.
whatever I need or want most. But what we actually see is that that oftentimes money isn't the only thing. I'm not saying that money
Mhm.
doesn't motivate. Money does
Yeah.
motivate. It motivates across the board. There isn't a cap on how much you earn that money won't
Mm.
motivate more. There's some elements of diminishing returns on that, but we won't necessarily get into that. But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that oftentimes you can create, particularly with salespeople, you can create short-term incentives that are
Mhm.
around winning, some a set of golf clubs, or
Mhm.
a grill, or some vacation that you're doing, and that can be much more powerful
Mhm.
than putting the equivalent of the cash that they would earn with that. And there's
Yeah.
research that shows that the cash component raises performance 10 to 15% in many of those examples, but when you put the merchandise or a trip or some other experiential type activity, that
Mhm.
increase in performance is 30%, 30 to 35, 40% increase. So if you just looked at the cash, you go, we're doing really good. It's increasing 10, 15%.
Mhm.
But if you looked at what you could be getting with equivalent kind of budget and outlay, you're
Mhm.
actually missing a lot of that performance. So that's just one example. And you can go into how you communicate to employees, to how you
Mhm.
structure a program, and how the steps that they need to go through, how you nudge things, how you set things up from a perspective of what is easy versus hard, and all sorts of different factors that come into play.
Let's go a little bit further into like the idea that, so, as leaders watching this, and not saying that somebody, wants to quote unquote change their employees as people, right? We're not saying that. What we're
No.
talking about is we're talking about wanting to, change maybe some of the behaviors, and to give incentives is one thing that you mentioned. Is there like a possibility for like real behavior change that's like lasting? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, there is. And so when we think about behavior change, there's a couple facets that I always talk about it, because I think one of the things that people don't understand is that it's this yin yang. So behavior
Yeah.
change on one aspect is really hard. It's really hard to
Mhm.
get people to change their behavior, particularly if they're set in their ways in various different things.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, behavior change is absolutely easy. We
Mhm.
change our behavior every single day. The way that we communicate today via text and social media and everything else is vastly different than what it was 10 years ago. Hugely, hugely different than what it was 25 years ago when I was starting out in various different
Yeah.
pieces in business. And so change happens all the time, and it just does, right? But when we're trying to change our employees' behavior, our own behavior, oftentimes we try to think about that as, I just need to get them more engaged, or from a personal perspective, it's about
Mhm.
the willpower. How much willpower do I have? And what we always talk about is behavior is driven internally by a fair
Mhm.
amount. I'm not saying that willpower doesn't matter, but it's also driven by the surroundings, the environment. As we like to
Mhm.
talk about in the business, context matters. And so the context, the environment that you place your people in, that you place yourself in, really makes a big difference. And so if you want to have lasting behavior change,
Mhm.
one of the things is, just make sure you understand what are those factors that are driving the right behaviors that you want,
Mhm.
and leveraging those and making that much more prevalent or easy to do. And
Mhm.
then what are the things that inhibit those good behaviors, and kind of reducing the friction that comes with that. I give
Mhm.
this example all the time as I talk about, I love Oreo cookies, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those factors. I work out of my house,
Mhm.
and so I go down 3 or 4 in the afternoon typically. I kinda get those little hunger pains and need that afternoon snack. And I know that if there's Oreo cookies in the cabinet, in the cupboard right
Mhm.
there, and I open it up, I can have the best willpower in the world and trying to avoid, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I shouldn't eat those. I should eat the carrots or the nuts or whatever's a little bit
Yeah.
more healthy." But if they're there, I will more than likely probably grab 1 or 2, and then 1 or 2 leads to 3 or 4, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and all of a sudden the entire Oreo sleeve is gone. So one of the things that we can do is, A,
Mhm.
I can just take those Oreos, and instead of having them in the cupboard, I just move them down to our downstairs into the basement. We have shelves down there, right? They're still there. If I still want them and they're okay, I can go
Mhm.
down and do that. But just that added extra distance that
Mhm.
I would have to walk in order to get them. So I go open up the cupboard. They're not right in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm less likely to go down and eat those Oreos and then get stuck in that vicious cycle. So it's things like that. It's setting up your
Mhm.
environment for success as opposed to failure.
Hmm. Man, Kurt, Pringles get me every time.
There
I'm
you
like,
go.
"Don't
It's
don't
yeah.
put a thing of Pringles in front of me." I'm done with it. Now you
Yeah,
got me
and
thinking
as
about
much as you wanna sell yourself, "Oh, this time I'm gonna not do it,"
this
it's
time I'm
really
not gonna eat the whole thing. Yeah, right. If I open up that Pringles can, it's done.
yeah, that's how it works. So
Well, Kurt, I wanna maybe shift focus here just slightly for a moment. Let's get into Lantern Group because before we go further in our conversation, I want to talk a little bit more about what you do and really how you're working with organizations. So, tell us a little bit more about your firm.
yeah, so Lantern Group is a behavioral change and communication agency. So what we do is we work with organizations on bringing a behavioral science lens into their employee kind of performance. So looking at how are your employees behaving? And mostly that is around employee motivation and engagement. And a lot of that is with salespeople. So again, we work with employee bases, we work across the organization on a number of different things, but the vast majority of the work that we do is really going in and trying to understand what are the things that are driving the behaviors from a motivational perspective and engagement perspective of your workforce. And
Mm,
so with that, what we tend to do is go in, we'll do a diagnostic and kind of deep dive, again, bringing all the behavioral science insights that we have to understand what are the root causes of those behaviors and what can you do as an organization to drive the right behaviors that you want. And so that's the upfront, that's the behavioral change piece, the behavioral design aspect that we do. And then on the back end, what we've realized is that most organizations frame. We don't always use a gain. It kind of
mhm,
depends on the culture and what you're trying to achieve and various different things. But that's the
mm,
type of work that we try to bring in when we're working with our clients. And so we're trying to understand what is the strategy that they're doing that they need to
mhm,
achieve, what are the behaviors that they need in order to achieve that
mhm,
strategy, and then we apply the behavioral science insights to understand what their employee base is going through, what are the
mhm.
factors, the context that they're within, and then we build initiatives around that, whether that be training, communication, others, everything from a simple PowerPoint to videos. We do a lot of work with employee videos and
Mhm.
to executive speeches and different pieces along that to training programs. So all across the board.
Now, are you, or if you give us some insight? So, is this? I know you work with a lot of large companies. You work with small businesses as well, middle market. Like any specific industries or agnostic? Like, give us a little bit of a feel for
Yeah.
that.
We tend to work mostly with, I said, Fortune 1000 companies.
Mhm,
Our We work across industries, but the main industry that we tend to
mhm,
be working in is bioscience, pharmaceutical, med device. So that's
mhm,
80% of the work that we do. Really working, most of that work is with the sales side of the organization. So
mhm,
again, 70% of that work is working with the sales side of the organization.
mhm,
We don't work as much with small companies. We do some mid-tier companies across the board.
mhm,
And that is actually really, we get excited about that because oftentimes we're able to have a larger impact across the entire organization as opposed to working within departments or divisions within some of the larger organizations that we work with.
mhm. And now, is there a? I know there's the B2B component. Is there a C component to experiencing some of your content?
Yeah, so the really interesting piece that we started to do about 3 years ago is, so I have 4 employees and we have a number of contractors that we use. So we're a relatively small business, but
Mhm.
we have a large impact. And one of the things that we realized is that, hey, we're doing all of this great work of bringing behavioral science insights into the world of B2B. And so if
Yeah.
you're in a large organization, you get that education, you get that knowledge, you get the tools,
Mhm.
the tips, all of those things to do that. As you mentioned before, also a co-host of Behavioral Groups podcast. And with Behavioral Groups podcast, we interview behavioral scientists and researchers from around the globe. So we have all this great information about, again, understanding why we do what we do. And the
Mhm.
fact that we realized is we're not able to get that information and the tools necessary to apply that information to individuals' lives. And so what we did is we started building out what we're calling Brain Shift. And so Brain Shift is it's a series of different products. Right now we have a 13-week journal that is a guided journal. So basically it is taking behavioral science insights every week. You get a new behavioral science insight to learn. We have specific prompts every day that are different, and so they're unique to the day based upon the behavioral science insight, but also really baked into that behavioral science insights that we know will drive behavior change and help you achieve goals. So over 13 weeks, you are having a daily guided journal that will help you set the right goals, break those goals down into manageable chunks, make sure that you're keeping yourself motivated, expressing gratitude that helps in kind of making sure that you have the right mindset to move forward with this, to helping you be more creative and thinking about what you need to do and identifying roadblocks that might come in the way and how you're going to overcome those, and a variety of different factors. So that journal is a very powerful tool. In addition to that, we have other aspects. So we have these shorter guides that are, all right, how do you set a goal? So one of the things that we know is that goals are really important to driving behavior.
Mhm.
How do you set the appropriate goal for what you want to do? And people have a hard time. You think about New Year's Eve and you setting everybody kind of sets that resolution, and the research shows that, hey, within 2 to 3 weeks, 70-90% of people drop that, kind of working on that goal. Well, part of that is because they haven't set the right goal to really align with their self-identity. And so we have a leader shift docket that's out there that looks at how do you make sure that you're setting the right goal, and then how do you break that goal down into manageable chunks, and you bringing some of the science in so it helps you kind of make sure that you're achieving the goals that you set for yourself. And then we have a calendar that again helps you every month go through goals, and we're building that out more and more. And so over the course of the next month, we're going to have journal volume number 2, so the Brain Shift number 2, different behavioral science insights. We're going to have a manager's journal coming up shortly, where if you're a manager, you need to understand, how can I really make sure that my team is operating at its best? So how do I have those crucial conversations? How do I make sure that I'm motivating and engaging my employees, my team, to their best ability? How do I build collaboration?
Yeah.
All of the science behind that is built into that journal that will then help you day to day go in and
Mhm.
work with your team and be able to do that. So that's the whole Brain Shift brand that we're building out, that is going to be out there for the consumer side.
Yeah, and I'm excited to watch this brand continue to build and to build upon your work. But you did mention the Behavioral Grooves podcast. You know I was going to circle back to that. My listeners know I love supporting podcasts, podcasters. I might be biased, right, because we have a podcast agency, but I think everybody should have a podcast, especially for any business owners, business leaders out there that want to communicate and get their message out there. I love the podcast. But for yourself, so that I won't be the only one preaching this, why did you start your show? And you told us a little bit about it, but go a little bit further.
Yeah, so the start of the show is actually interesting. So I have my co-host Tim Houlihan. We've known each other for years, but he worked at a different company that I did business with, and so we got to work with each other. But it was kind of on project by project basis. But we
Yeah.
really admired each other and kind of the work that we did. He left that position
Hmm.
back in 2017, and right away I reached out and I said, hey, we got to figure out something to do. And
Yeah.
so we met over lunch. We kind of were talking over all the stuff, and he was starting his own consultancy at the time, and we said, hey, let's start this piece where we want to build this community about, for people to really help understand and how I can use behavioral science and build a community around helping people understand why we do what we do. And we
Mhm.
actually started this not as a podcast. We started as a meetup. And so in the Minneapolis Twin
Wow.
Cities area, we were we looked out there, there wasn't anything there. So we started this meetup. And what was really interesting is, the first one we kind of did ourselves. The second one, we brought in a speaker, and the speaker is a
Mm.
relatively famous speaker. And so we're going, oh, we're going to have 25, maybe 30 people show up at the second one. Tim, who I love to death, is a musician on the side as well. So he has 6
Yeah.
albums that he's done. He's kind of folk kind of artist and has all this recording equipment. And I had just done a radio interview. And so I said, let's think about this. We're going to talk to 25, 30 people, but we could put this out as a podcast, really
Mm.
simple. And it can give, hundreds of people, if not
Yeah.
thousands of people that it'll get to. And we go, we're doing a meetup once a month. So we'll just bring the speaker in every month and have them get there an hour first. We'll talk about what they're going to talk about. We'll put that up
Yeah.
as a podcast and boom, we're done. Once a month thing. It'll be really easy. Couple hours extra a week. And as you know, that's not how this works. So we found out that we had so much fun with that. And the fact of the matter is we wanted to talk to so many people that we knew in
Mm.
the industry that were researching and doing this great stuff. And they weren't going to fly to Minneapolis to come to a meetup.
Yeah.
But with the technology, we could get them on a podcast. And so it became kind of it
Mm.
overtook the meetup. Definitely, we've actually, once COVID hit, kind of the meetup kind of faded
Yeah.
away, but the podcast kind of expanded. And so now
Mm.
350 episodes in, we're talking with some of
Yeah.
the leading researchers from around the globe, Nobel laureates, people who have really kind of made their mark. I mean, some people, Philip
Mhm.
Zimbardo of the Stanford prison experiment, Gary Latham, who developed the goal methodology theory and a variety of different things, to a variety of the new kind of researchers out there that are bringing up the new kind of cutting
Mm.
edge insights that we understand from psychology, sociology, neurology, all of those factors. And so it's really fun. I think we mentioned in our talk before we did this, it's my favorite part of the week. So
Yeah. It is a lot of fun, and I that's why I have to get the story and why you started and the evolution of it, because I feel like everybody's story and how they started, how they like when we started the first podcast we started, I didn't even want to do it. The other co-founder, Chirag, he's like, Adam, you got to do a podcast. I'm like, for what? He's like, well, so we could sell more books. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. What am I going to do with a podcast? And all these years later, all these episodes, it's been really one of the driving forces behind our media brand and really just a lot of the fun around building our community. I love that you mentioned the podcast and what you're doing is this community, because it does become a community of all of these individuals with this shared experience from maybe different backgrounds that, have come together to collaborate for the sake of a show and to get, meaningful content out to different podcast audiences. So I think it's awesome. Speaking of communities, we're not going to go far into the book today, as I mentioned before to the audience. And the reason is because we will be bringing Kurt back on for a part two of this interview series. And we'll do a deep dive into his writing and in the book once it's out and live. So don't worry there. But keeping it really high level today, Kurt. And I know we're still in editing and the editing phase of things, but high level, what are some of the things you hope to propose in the upcoming book?
yeah, so again, it relates back to, from a leadership position,
Yeah.
what can leaders learn from behavioral science that will make them better leaders, and what do they need to understand about human behavior, human motivation, to apply within their employees and the projects and programs and way
Mhm.
they set up the business to really leverage those insights. So it's not just about, hey, here are the things to avoid, but it's about, here are the things that you can tap into. And that,
Mm.
I think, for me, again, it goes back to that mission, right? Helping people understand better about what drives our behavior and what drives the way that we think. And so that's really what this is, but really specifically for leaders as they're building that out.
All right, I'm cutting you off there. I do sell books. Everybody's got to come back and we'll tell you more about it when you can click on the link and grab a copy. We're not there yet. But Kurt, I tell you, it has been great having you on the show today. I learned a lot about not only behavioral science, but your background, and also, the inception of your podcast, a lot of great things here. So awesome welcoming you to the community, and just have to ask, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for your business? What's next for the podcast?
Yeah, so what's been very interesting, I mean, we've been growing by leaps and bounds in the past 2, 3 years. I mean, it's amazing when you think about everything that the world has gone through and
Mhm.
how that has impacted us. So, what's next for us is we are continuing to grow what it is that motivates them, what engages them, what are the can do in order to leverage that to be able to say, hey, let's make sure that we're giving our employees the things that they need in order
Mhm.
to stay engaged and motivated, that they want to keep working with us and want to do the great work that they're want to do from their own perspective. And then two, building out that consumer side of things. And I think that for me is really exciting as we're taking that next step, is saying,
Mhm.
how can we take all of this great knowledge that we have, the pieces that we built for corporations and those tools and tips and all of the factors that go into that, and make that available to anybody that's out there, whether it be an individual who just wants to buy it for themselves, or whether it be for a team manager who companies, or even mostly medium-sized companies, but might be that individual manager who has 10 people working for him or her.
Mhm.
And hey, can I use some of these tools to really help me or to help my team? And so
Mhm.
those are the factors that I think are really exciting as we're moving forward. That's what I'm super excited about over the course of the next year or two.
And Kurt, if somebody's watching this or listening to your journey and of course your podcast, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so obviously you can go out to lanterngroup.com, you can go out to behavioralgrooves.com on all of those, and we'll have all that information there. If you want to just, I'm out on Twitter a lot, and so if you just want to kind of ask a question or do something else, I'm at actually two of them, at Motivation Guru and at What Motivates. So two different Twitter handles. I don't know why, but it just happened. So Motivation Guru and What Motivates are the two different ones that I have. And so reach out. As I said, it's that community piece, and I am happy to just talk to anybody about behavioral science.
That's the type of content that sounds interesting or fun or exciting to you, we invite you. Hit that subscribe button because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Kurt, really, until the next time, man, it's been a pleasure working with you today and looking forward to the next interview.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Thanks, everybody.